on the situation in Burma, I'm now joined by journalist Sylvie BRIEU. She's the author of Birmanie, les chemins de la liberté, which translates as Burma, the roads to freedom. Hello, thank you very much for coming in. So we just heard there about freedom of speech issues, but I'd like to ask you more generally what people in Burma, if it is possible to answer such a general question, are making 1 year on of Aung San Suu Kyi and her government.
Well, when Aung San Suu Kyi's party, the National League for Democracy, won the election in November 2015, there were high expectations in the country. And today, a year after the government came into power, there's a lot of disappointment because people's expectations were so high that they were going to be disappointed for sure after a year. And the situation, the main challenge for Aung San Suu Kyi is to bring peace to the country because the country is divided by there are ethnic and religious divides in the country. And since the independence of the country in 1948, there are being guerrillas, armed ethnic groups. Some armed ethnic groups have been fighting against the Burmese National Army. So she has to face that main challenge. There's also a rise in the hatred speech on social networks, and this is led by Buddhist extremist monks. So she has to face this and some major violations still of human rights in the country.
Now, you mentioned peace, and this really was her main issue before coming to power, peace. She's been criticised, though, for not saying very much about the situation in Rakhine State. There's been a crackdown there. There's even talk of crimes against humanity. Why is it that she's not speaking up? Is she afraid to speak up? Is there the issue of the military still very much keeping an eye on what she's doing and what she says?
Yeah, it's important to understand that Aung San Suu Kyi and her party have to rule with the military because it's still the drafted constitution. The constitution that rules the country, the political life of Burma, was drafted by the military in 2008, and it gives 3 ministries to the military. Key ministries, Ministry of Defense is in the hand of the military, the Ministry of Home Affairs, the Ministry of Border Affairs. There are 25% of the seats in Parliament are in the hands of the military as well. And also something important is that the president, who's a close friend of Aung San Suu Kyi, Tin Sho, has no control over the army. The person in charge of the army is the commander-in-chief of the army. So in Rakhine State, the major crackdown was there's fighting going on between the military is persecuting, the armed forces are persecuting the Rohingya people, the Rohingya Muslim people, and violence has been escalating over the past month since last November. So what can she say? I mean, I don't know how to answer that question, but I ask people who work with Rohingya people in Rakhine State where the violences are taking place, and they say that even if she was saying something, that wouldn't change anything.
Because she's not directly in control of what the military does.
Well, first, she's not in control at all of what the military does, but there's also something about saying something. She has no power. The words she could say, even if she called for compassion, that wouldn't have any effect on, that wouldn't stop the violences against the Rohingya people, because the hatred against Rohingya people in Rakhine State is really endemic. And that was stated in a report by the UN a few years ago.
So where does her power come from then? What is it that she can really take control over, and does she perhaps have a long-term plan, because after all 1 year isn't very much time to bring about change?
Well, 1 year is not a lot of time after the country stopped for 50 years of military rules. The country has she has to start from scratch in different fields. It's hard to tell what she's really doing because she doesn't communicate much, and she's really reluctant to communicate with the media, because I guess she doesn't trust anybody.
She's been criticized for that.
She's been criticized for that, and although also Burma is not a dictatorship anymore, but it's not a democracy anymore. So I think in this bumpy or chaotic time, she's very cautious about what she's saying.
So she's in government, and now what happens on the ground when it comes to campaigning then on human rights issues? We heard in the report from an activist called Wai Nu, and you mentioned her in the book that I mentioned at the beginning when I introduced you. So there are women, there are people still on the ground trying to bring about change as well.
Well, a lot of people have been inspired by Aung San Suu Kyi because she's been these iconic figures for almost 25 years now. And so they know, most activists in the field, in the ground, know they cannot expect everything for Aung San Suu Kyi anymore. So they have to take their own responsibilities. So a young lady like Wai Nu, women play also a major change in paving the road to freedom and democracy. And they work really hard on trying to build bridges between community and trying to profoundly transform the society and trying to work beyond ethnic and religious divide that endanger the future of potential democracy in the country.
All right, I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed, Sylvie BRIEU, for coming in for today's Focus.